One of our big problems is better understanding how this pathogen is spreading. Much of the research is in the forests of California and Oregon, but there's also a lot of work that has really already demonstrated the importance of nursery trade in moving the pathogen long distances on infected rhododendrons, for example, between countries and between states in the United States. USDA APHIS is responsible for regulating this trade and protecting values in the United States from the importation of infected stock and the movement of selling of infected stock between states. But until we know what the origin of this exotic pathogen was, we really are working under a severe handicap. We can hardly prevent its further introduction if we don't know where it came from or how it got here. We have efforts underway looking in some of what we think are the most likely places, wild places where the pathogen may be native. The Himalayan mountains, where there are many, many species of wild rhododendron, and where there's been for several hundred years an active trade, importation of plants to this country and to Europe for the exotic new species, new cultivars, new colors into the horticultural industry. That's a possible avenue of introduction, and now people are looking in China, in Southeast Asia, to see if the pathogen perhaps is native there.
Sudden oak death is potentially a devastating disease if it's introduced into our eastern forests. The oak hardwood forest type is the #1 forest type in the U.S., and certainly out here in the east we have tremendous acreage of oak forests. So if this pathogen was to be introduced and was to cause some of the devastating damage that it has already in California and along the west coast there, we could well see a lot of implications rolling out of that, in that not only are we losing trees, so we're losing timber value, and aesthetically landscapes and things are not going to look quite as nice with dead trees. The impact of sudden oak death doesn't just end with dead trees. Those dead trees have a big impact on the ecosystem of which they're part of, in the fact that, #1, we have the watershed being affected and the water quality coming from that area. We have a loss of habitat for wildlife, loss of food source for wildlife. It impacts the recreation in that area, and that some of those trees are going to be hazards because they're close to campgrounds, they're close to hiking trails, they may be close to people's homes, and a hazard in that fashion. Also, when we have a lot of dead standing trees, in particular when it's dry out, we have an increased fire hazard. When we open large areas of the forest to a lot of dead trees, we give a really nice setup for the invasive plants to move in and cause a lot of problems for us. So these are just a few of the reasons why we really need to be vigilant and keep sudden oak death, the Phytophthora ramorum pathogen, from reaching our eastern forests.
What would happen if this pathogen was established in our eastern hardwood forests? Research has shown that some of these tree species, particularly northern red oak and white oak, are susceptible to the pathogen, and damage could be tremendous. Historically, other pathogens that are not native to the U.S., such as the chestnut blight fungus or the Dutch elm disease fungus, have caused devastating changes to those ecosystems. So managing Phytophthora ramorum is not just a matter of trying to eradicate it in Oregon or slow the spread in California. It's preventing widespread distribution of the pathogen and preventing possibly devastating impacts to our eastern forests as well.
While oaks are important ecosystem components wherever they grow, on the west coast, where ramorum diseases are presently causing problems, oaks are a relative island in a sea of conifers. However, as you can see in this landscape in the eastern hardwood forest, oaks are the ocean. And this is the reason for our concern and our close attention to this potentially devastating disease.
So as a scientist, I really struggle over these issues of movement of a pathogen that you can't see readily by air, by water, by soil, and trying to tell people what kind of actions they should take to best eliminate the potential spread of the pathogen. But we don't have the answers to those questions, so we tell people to take a precautionary approach, but we don't truly know how to evaluate what actually is happening out there. So there's a lot of unanswered questions.
As Kashaya people right now, we don't know what the future holds, and that's a really scary thing to know that. And it's even worse to be able to have to look at those elders and tell them that, well, I don't have an answer for you. I can't tell you honestly if we can stop it or not. One of the really hard things for me personally was to drive through an area that had been completely decimated by sudden oak death. It had wiped out the huckleberries, and about 70% of the trees were down in that area. And to drive through there and know that before I had gone with my great-grandmother, my aunt, my grandma, and stop and picked huckleberries and picked blackberries for pies, and that's all gone. And it's sad because the next generation is going to be robbed of those beautiful areas and those really pristine gathering places that our people have enjoyed for forever.
One critical thing is this pathogen, Phytophthora ramorum, can actually infect every single woody plant species in this forest. Hosts such as tan oak will die, and tan oaks from the smallest seedlings to the largest tree can die of this disease. Other plant species such as redwood, the foliage will become infected, and sometimes we see dieback of the small sprouts. Madrones can also be killed in some respects. Douglas fir will get infected and show some dieback, but does not kill big trees. The disease also does not kill big redwood trees. One of the more critical hosts is the bay laurel, which only the foliage becomes infected. It doesn't really impact the tree, but what's critical here is that the pathogen makes lots of spores on the dead portions of leaves, which then can spread the pathogen across the landscape to infect other hosts.